On this episode of Coding 101, it's the end of our Build an App module. It's time to get C#.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Coding 101 is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This episode of Coding 101 is brought to you by Lynda.com. Lynda is an easy and affordable way to help you learn. Instantly stream thousands of courses created by experts on business, software, web development, graphic design, and more. For a free trial, visit lynda.com/C101. That's LYNDA.com/C101. Welcome to Coding 101. It's the show where we teach you all the ins, the outs, the secrets of the Code Masters. I'm Father Robert Ballecer, the digital Jesuit, here to introduce you to our code warrior, Mr. Lou Maresca. Lou, it's great to have you back, sir. How have you been?
Hey, Padre. Fantastic. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, well, you know, this is an exciting day because we get to close up our first ever module, mini module, where we're actually showing people how to do an app from start to finish. Now, the last 3 episodes have all been about putting together a task manager in C#. The idea was go through the logic. What kind of features do we need? What do we need the program to do? Then actually show you how you build things in from an API into the view model and finally into the view. So today we're going to be going through what? A little bit of Xamarin?
That's right. Yeah, we're going to take the app that we built last like 2 or 3 episodes, and then we're going to take that and put that in Xamarin and then compile up. So we're going to show you the Windows Phone version and then the Android version of it.
Yeah, and this really is the promise of programming in a modern language, the idea of being able to code once and compile multiple times for different operating systems. And this is also, if we may toot our own horn here, one of the big reasons why you want to go with the view model style of programming, because you can make that back end and then just change the view based on whatever operating system you're finally going to run your app on top of. But Lou, before we get there, you think maybe we could take a look at some of the programming examples from our G+ community?
Yeah, let's do that. There's some really good ones out there today.
I know, I love it. And actually, both of the ones that I chose for today do come from Joe Maruschek. He's been in there forever. He's fantastic. He's a lot of fun to watch because he likes to take what we give to our audience, change it just a little bit so that he can demonstrate a point and then throw it back to us. So the first one, if you go ahead and go to this link, is also from the Google Plus group. It's simple data binding. What he wanted to do was to give us a way to use a slider control to show how data can be bound. Now, go ahead and go to my screen, Brian, and what you'll see is that the way that he has programmed this is this little slider here is tied to a number. Now, it's not just changing the number when we move the slider. It's got to go back to a module, or we could think of it as the view module, in order to take the input from the screen, turn it back into some sort of numerical value, and then push it back out to the view. Now, at least that's how it should work. You can take a look at the code if you'd like. He's got the link up on our G+ community. But when I run this, very simply, all it does is it allows me to move this. And as you can see, the number will increment or decrement based on where that slider will be between 1 and 10. Now, Lou, what exactly is going on behind the scene when I have a program like this?
So really, what it's doing is it's running the code that's in the view model to basically calculate, and then it's then sending back. It's a two-way binding, so then it's sending back messages to the UI that it needs to update that text field with the new numbers.
Right. Now, when I was writing procedural programming back in my college days, there was no real solid data binding. So if you wanted to do something, you would move even though we didn't really have sliders, you would move the position of the object, and then you'd have to hit calculate in order for it to do it, to give it back to you. This is one of the advantages of data binding, which is if we tightly bind the view and the view model, we can get instant feedback for the users, and that's really what we've come to expect. We won't do it any other way. Joe also sent us another example. If you go ahead and go to that second link, Brian, he said, okay, well, now that you've got your taste for a simple binding example, why don't I show you what it looks like if I use a custom-made object. And so what he came up with is this. If you go back to my computer, Brian, he gave us this wonderful XAML interface that allows us to do this. If you go and compile it. Again, this is something that you might see on a modern app or on a modern website. So I can do a task name. Obviously, he's seen a bit too much Captain America or Avengers. I get my task owner, and then this is important because remember, we wanted to have some sort of calendar inside of our Task Manager application. He gives me a drop-down menu. Now, the wonderful thing about this, Lou, is this is actually built in. He didn't have to code this from scratch. This was all built into the C# framework, right?
Yep, that calendar controls there for everybody to use, so it's pretty easy to use.
Yeah. So, for example, I could choose this date, and then when I click the Show Current Object Properties, again, what it will do is it will take everything that was in the view, we'll push it back to the view model. The view model will turn it into what you see here as it pushes it back out to the view. Thank you, Joe. This is fantastic. This is why we love having your examples on the show, because it really does bring out the individual pieces that we're trying to teach people as we move through our examples. Now, when we come back, we're going to go ahead and start in on the last segment of our Build an App module. Lou's going to show us how to use Xamarin in order to turn all the programming that we've been doing into something that actually looks nice, that we might want to install on our mobile device. But before we do that, let's go ahead and take a moment to thank the sponsor of this episode of Coding 101, and that's lynda.com. Now, what is lynda.com? You may be asking yourself. It is a one-stop shop on the internet to find out everything you need to know. And by everything you need to know, I don't mean just find out new stuff about new topics, about new skills, new softwares, new procedures that you want to learn. I'm talking about a one-stop shop for new knowledge and for reference material. That's really the strength of lynda.com. Lynda.com works directly with industry experts and software companies to provide timely training, often the same day that new versions or releases hit the market, so that you'll always be up to speed if you've got your Lynda.com account. All courses are produced at the highest quality, which means you're not going to have bad lighting. You're not going to have that shaky camera. You're not going to have audio that sounds like you're speaking into a toilet paper roll. Lynda understands that, well, if you're focusing too much on the production values of a lesson, you're probably not paying attention to the lesson. So although we don't like to denigrate YouTube videos out there, there is something about learning from a quality source. Now, tools include searchable transcripts, playlists, and certificates of course completion, which you can publish to your LinkedIn profile, which is great if you're a professional who wants potential employers to know what you've trained in. Whether you're a beginner or advanced, lynda.com apps for iOS and Android will meet you at all your experience levels. They've got one low monthly price of $25, which gives you unlimited access to over 100,000 video tutorials, and premium plan members can also download project files and practice along with the instructor. And premium members will all, with an annual plan, can download courses to watch offline, which means it can be that perfect reference material even when you're not connected to the internet. Now, lynda.com also has courses on the foundations of programming, getting up and running with C, simple Android development tools, and how to teach kids programming with iOS. There's even a series on programming for non-programmers. But for any software you rely on, lynda.com can help you stay current with all software updates and learn the ins and outs to be more effective and productive. And we've got a special offer for you to access all of these courses free for 7 days. Visit lynda.com/C101 to try lynda.com free for 7 days. That's lynda.com/C101. And we thank Lynda for their support of Coding 101. Now, Lou, I wanted to get to this as fast as possible because we always seem to run out of time towards the end of our episodes. We need to turn all this code that we've been working on, all the code that's available on our show notes page for people who want to tinker around with, into something that I would actually want to install on my phone or my tablet. How do I do it?
Yeah, you bet. So one of the things that we want to pay attention to is the UI. Again, it should be, you could as complex as you want or as simple as you want. The key is you want to keep all of the code that you want to run on your app out of it. So when you have a project like the Windows Phone app or the Windows Tablet app that I had, the UI should be by itself. You could just construct the UI using the UI Manager, UI Builder, put your UI components on there, your list boxes for the tasks and the buttons and the images and all that stuff. But you want to stay away from trying to write any code, anything behind the scenes. And so when you're hooking things up, like Joe showed, you want to make sure that you're hooking up those events, but using the view model type mechanisms rather than trying to put code in the code behinds.
Right. And actually, Brian, if you go back to my screen, this is what the code looks like for Joe's program. This is what actually generates this view. And as you can tell, there's nothing there. All this is the parameters for how big the box will be, what the fields in the box are named, and that's it. All the code is stored in other modules elsewhere in the project. And Lou, why do we want to do that? Why is it not okay just to dump all my code in that little design box?
Honestly, it not only does it get confusing, but it also prevents you from kind of like maintaining it. It gets really complex. UI, people who do web development too, when you're building your HTML object with your CSS style sheets, it can get really overwhelming and complex with all that stuff already in there. And then you're going to go ahead and put additional logic in there. It just gets way over complex. If you go back to Joe's example, you'll see that he actually has in, like, for instance, the text attribute down there, you see that he actually has binding and then the path, and then it says name and then binding path owner. So what he's doing is he's binding to like properties in his code files. And so there's a name property and an owner property, and then when that actual UI renders, it'll show the data from those texts from those actual properties. And that's exactly what you should be doing to kind of, again, simplify your user interface kind of building that you're doing.
Right. Some of the most nightmare code I've ever had to fix, I remember I was doing this about a year ago, actually. We had a programmer who put some of the logic inside the view. And what happened was we didn't know that there was code executing in there. So when we were trying to push out, we kept getting just garbled data going back to the user. And it was because he hadn't followed the proper model. If you put something executable inside of that last step, it's just going to mess up anybody who comes after you. I mean, actually, it'll probably even mess you up when you come back to your program 6 months later.
That's right. That's right. So one thing that, like, I'll show you the example that I have, and then we can kind of go through how to build it. So we had the original portable class library that we built that had that task manager in there. We had a bunch of logic in there, and I'll drop it down here. We had, get your task lists or authenticate the user, get a specific task by an ID, that kind of thing. And so that's where all the logic kind of lives. That's the object that kind of handles all that, that proxying between the Google service and pulling the data and so on. But then I actually built just a really simple Windows Phone app. And what you'll see here is kind of the example of that. The first thing that the user is going to see is a button that they're going to do to basically click and then log in. And you'll notice that it's not overly complex because there's a bunch of white space in here, but you'll notice that there's still a lot of lines of the XAML, the XML for the UI, even though there's no logic in there. And you notice that I'm actually binding to a click event.
Right.
So, I mean, again, if you were to put a whole bunch of logic in here and then a whole bunch of click events, and then you have a code behind file and you have a lot of code in that code behind file, it gets really complex. My code behind file, if I zoom out, is only like 50 lines long, really.
Right. And actually, if you go back to that window, I know people are going to get freaked out whenever they see something new. But all this code you have in here, if you've ever done any CSS or HTML programming, it looks a lot like this. You're defining how it looks. You're naming fields so that they can be accessed by other elements that are going to use the UI. This program, so to speak, is just designing what you're going to see on your screen. And again, as you mentioned, everything else is going to happen behind the scenes.
That's right. And if you can try to keep it simple, like for instance, I can get even more complex and build a theming file and all these other files that allow you to make it a little simpler then you don't have the styles and all that stuff in your XAML file too. But for now, we just kind of put everything in one file, like the foreground color and the text and the font style and all that stuff. But you can actually simplify the UI XAML file even more by using theming and template files as well. So right now we didn't do that, but again, this is just to kind of show how to build a very simple UI and then manufacture that over to like Android or iOS type of thing too.
Right. All right, so push us forward. Now you've got the basic structure of what your iOS app is going to do. We know where the code lives. It's actually behind the UI. It's not part of it. Where do we go from here?
Sure. So like, I guess one of the things we want to do is we want to show you how, so a lot of the questions I saw on Google Plus was, how do I get this to kind of compile and run in my Visual Studio Express version and then into Xamarin? So one of the things that a user noticed was they had a console app and then the portable class library in one solution. And the problem with that is, I guess the way the Visual Studio Express works is you either get it to use it for the phone or you get it for the desktop. You can't use it for both. And so both projects that were in there were for both. And so the workaround was to kind of remove the console app in there and then go ahead and add go ahead and add the Windows Phone version of it.
Can you show us how you would do that? Go ahead and guide us through that process.
Yes, no problem. So one of the things I'll show you, I'll pop open the console app by itself here, and then see if it pops open quickly here. And then once we do that, you'll see that there's actually the console app in the solution viewer. And once I actually go over here, so actually, this is already built. But normally there would be already a console app in here. And so I would basically click on the console app and I would just go down to remove.
Okay.
And I can remove it out. And we'll actually give you a project with just the portable class in it. And then you could go ahead and remove that project out. The project will already be removed, and then you won't have any problem. And then what you want to do is you want to add your universal app. So what I did was you can go to click New Project. And what will actually pop up is all the templates. And if you've already installed Xamarin Studio, which you can get from Xamarin.com, you'll notice in here that there's several other projects that don't look familiar, like, for instance, Android, iOS, and things that you could build for an iPad. You could build it for pretty much any versions of Android that you can possibly imagine. And it gives you templates for those. So what you can do is, another thing I can do is I can add what we call a Universal Store app too. And that's what I did. I added a Universal Store app. And that allows me to not only add a tablet version for Windows Store, but also a phone version. So what you'll get is these two guys right here. You'll get a Windows Phone empty project and a Windows Tablet empty project.
Nice.
So once you have that, now you have kind of like a universe. So now you're starting to build your Windows Phone and Windows Tablet version. And you notice I still only have this portable class library. So next thing you want to do is you want to click on the properties of this project here. And you'll notice, okay, it gives me what my portable class library assembly name is, and then what we're going to target. So this is really important because if you're not targeting the right stuff, it's not going to work. So what you need to do is you need to tell it, yes, I do want to target it for .NET 4.5. I want to target it for Windows Store apps, Windows 8.1. I want to target it for Windows Phone apps, Windows 8.1. But I also want to target it for Android and iOS.
Right.
And so that'll make it so that the compiler will kind of emit the Xamarin versions of these as well.
Right. Well, it's just going to go through your code and it's going to make sure that all the little subtle changes are made so that whatever commands you're using will execute on each OS.
Right. Exactly. So now you're actually going to see something interesting down here, and I'm glad this happened because then everyone can kind of see what you can do when this happens. So you're getting an error here saying that the NuGet package installed is not current, which means that you should probably go and update it because the ones that Xamarin are using are probably newer, and you need to update yours. So what you can do is you can kind of go over to all your projects here, or you actually can go up to Tools, Packet Manager here, and you can go to the ones that you have installed, and you'll notice that there's the Microsoft BCL components. And you can actually manage that and upgrade that. But the one that they want is it called the Microsoft BCL. So you can go and find Microsoft BCL, and that's for online, Microsoft BCL. And then you're going to want to install the one that comes up here. Oops. Of course, it goes off the screen. And then once you install that one, it will actually add all of the appropriate files, and this will kind of like just go away. And what you'll get is this guy right here that actually has the appropriate stuff in here. So you have the Microsoft BCL, which is the base class library, and then all of the other APIs that you already have in here. And then you can go start building your interface. Once you're done with that, though, this is kind of the cool part. So I'm going to switch. I'm going to go from Visual Studio, and I'm going to go over to Xamarin. So I'm going to open up Xamarin Studio. And again, Xamarin Studio you can get from just Xamarin.com. And what you're going to see here is this guy here. It kind of looks like a version of Visual Studio or Eclipse, if you've ever used Eclipse before on Android. And you can kind of go and jump in and create a new solution. You can do whatever you want. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up what I already have, which is this, this Task Console application we've already built. And what you'll notice in here is I already have my portable class library, and I already have my Windows Phone and Windows. You notice those kind of get grayed out, and they're saying, okay, well, you can't build that in here. But what you can do is you can do this Android app. And so what I did here is you can kind of go and go to the project and click add packages, and you can actually add an Android app in here. You can add iOS or Android, and you can create an Android app in here. And what you'll get is a kind of a default view. And so now what you have to do is now you can basically reference in here your Windows, your tasks library that you already have. So you check the box right here in references, you hit go, and now you actually are referencing from your Android project the PCL, the portable class library that you built.
Nice.
So you're now, it basically just automatically hooks it up for you. So now you hit OK, and now boom, my Android is now referencing the tasks library, and so now I can that task manager that's inside of there I can use. And so that makes it super powerful because now I wrote the code in C#, but I'm going to go ahead and do it in Android.
All right. Yeah, so what you've just shown us, I mean, because I know there's some people who are kind of glassing over right now, is you have been able to take software, programs that you've been writing in C#, and by bringing it into Xamarin, Xamarin now looks at it and says, oh, okay, well, this applies to this applies to this. Now go ahead and go and use it in Android.
That's right. And honestly, there's no magic here. Like, this is exactly how easy it is. I haven't done anything ahead of time. You basically just open the project in Xamarin Studio. If you got the latest one, it should match with your Visual Studio. You open the guy up, and then boom, you can basically add an Android version of that app. Now, the key here is the UI is not going to be done. So that's kind of where you have to kind of go in and start rebuilding the UI components. So that's why the simpler that you do it, the easier, because you have to use Android versions of those kind of controls. So you don't get that for free. But there is a version of Xamarin called Xamarin Forms, which you actually can pay for. And what they can do is they can take your Windows version and compile it, your Windows UI XAML, and actually make an Android version of it. So that makes it so that you can you just build a UI once, and they can kind of build it up for you for Android and iOS.
Yeah, basically for the purpose of Coding 101, if you are just testing it, get the free version. It's not going to cost you anything. It's only when you actually start to get into professional app development, when you have something you're going to want to sell, that it's going to start costing you money. But it's a great tool to have in your toolbox.
Right. So the way they do it for free is they actually make it so that if your package that you're deploying to the platform, the actual C# or .NET package you're deploying and compiling, if it's smaller, I can't remember what the size of a specific kilobytes, but if it's smaller than that, then you can do it for free, and then you can use their tools for free. And the way they do that is, again, they just get you to kind of test it out and utilize it. Some people have actually built apps that are so small that still are really cool, and they're still able to use it for free. So that's kind of the key, is if you can do a really good job of making sure your logic's real small, you can still use it for free.
So remember, folks, small apps are better.
That's right. Small and useful apps, right?
All right, take us through it. So now we're in Xamarin, and it's now recognized all my libraries, has brought over my code, and now I get to design my app for Android. How do I do that?
Sure. So they also make it super easy. So if you pop back over to my screen real quick, you'll see underneath resources. So this is kind of what the project looks like up front. You have all these folders, and we won't go through all of what the folders are, but what we want to do is we have what we call the main activity. And you notice, again, it's still a C# file. It's a .cs file. And this is just the out-of-the-box stuff that you get in here, this code. And you'll notice it has an onCreate method, and it's just an event when your app loads up, the Android app loads up for the first time. It's going to go and load the main, what we call the main window. And so it's saying, okay, the main window is inside of resource, layout, main. So let's go look in there. So resources, layout, and there's main right there. So let's go ahead and open that guy up. And you notice the first thing you'll see is it'll actually render a Android version of it. And you can change the orientation. You can change what device. You can Nexus, Galaxy Nexus, Nexus. There's no Nexus 6 yet, but there's Android TV, whichever one you kind of want. You can actually customize it to using the AVD manager. We actually have to install the Android SDK, which Examiner will do for you, and you can go and create new devices. Using their tool in here.
Right.
You can create how much RAM it has and how much storage.
But let's stay with something that's in the box, like Nexus 4. Let's go with the Nexus 4.
Yep, Nexus 4. Yep. So Nexus 4, and then you want to make sure you choose the right version. Right now, there is support for Android L or Lollipop, but we can go all the way down to kind of what the norm is today. I think it's Android 4.4 or 4.4.4. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And again, all languages, and it actually allows you to decide on what mode you want to be in. Right now, we just want normal mode. There's no car mode or anything like that. So then what you notice over here to the right is you have a toolbox. So you can actually, grab a button and you can drag it onto the screen. We already have a button here already, and you'll notice that it says "Hello World, click me." So what I can actually do is type in log in to Google, and now I have that that going on, and I can actually hook up an event to actually the behavior. Go click on behavior over here, and I can actually hook up the ability on the click event down here on click to I know I apologize, it's kind of small, but I can actually hook it up to my tasks class here. So I can go to coding 101 tasks. Sorry, I have to put twit.tv before it. Gotta remember that. It's in the namespace twit.tv at coding 1 tasks, tasks manager.
And all you're doing right now is you're tying elements inside this. This is the view. So this is the actual screen that someone would be seeing on their device to methods and processes that you have in the view model. So you're going back into the view model and saying, I need this button to activate something over here, and I need this field, this text box to be filled by the view model, and that's how you bind them.
Right. And so the way that Xamarin works is they have this ability. You can look at the content, or you can go to the source. And again, the source looks very familiar to the XAML version of it. As you can tell, it's very, very familiar. Again, it prefixes it with Android, but it's very, very familiar. So this is kind of the key here is you're still building UI similar to the way Visual Studio builds it, but you get to kind of do it, through their special studio. Once you hook that up, though, now all we have to do is we just build it. And if you specify the device up here, actually it's yelling at me on something. Oh, it's telling me again that BCL libraries is the incorrect one. So you want to go ahead and update it. But what you want to do is once you've updated that one like we did before, once you hit build, you actually see the Android emulator pop up, and then boom, you got your app kind of running in there. So it's very, very simple to kind of hook this up. This is just going to implement the login capabilities of the app, but again, you would then go in here and add a list box, and I can go down here and find the list view, and I can drag that on here, and the list view would allow me to basically list out my tasks once I have it. I can also go ahead in here and add additional views if I wanted to do that. So I can add additional layouts. So add a new file and a form, and it could be a content page, and I can call it like tasks view and hit new. And now I actually have like a tasks view, and again, it's a XAML file, and I can basically build it out very similar to how I did my main form. So again, they make it very easy, and it make it very similar to Visual Studio.
Right. The amazing thing is playing with this, playing with Xamarin, really kind of makes you appreciate good app design, because it sounds like it's so easy to make an app. You just throw a bunch of things on the page, but there's a fine line between providing too much functionality, too much information, and not enough. Doing it this way, it's a really, really good way to remember I may be processing a bunch of stuff in this program, not all of it needs to be available to the user, which again re-strengthens the idea of splitting up view model, and model.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so the kind of the key thing here is, the key takeaway is when you're building your portable class library, that's the biggest thing. That's the thing that you should pay a good majority of your time on as a coder, the good majority of your time on, because that's the thing that's going to allow you to become portable across all the different, especially in a Xamarin kind of environment. If you decide to use that, allows you to kind of go across all of the different platforms. And that's the key is you wrote it once, and now it gives you the ability to not waste your time and having to learn, Objective-C and Cocoa, and then over to Android, learning that, and Java. You only have to learn one language, C#, and you only have to really understand UI layout like XAML, which is very similar to how Xamarin does it. So once you learn those two concepts, you can kind of basically build an app and deploy it to all these platforms.
Now, Lou, I got to ask you, this was actually a question asked by 8-Bit Steve in our chat room, and he's saying, wait a minute, this looks too good to be true. If it's this easy to just make sure that your library, your portable library is good, and then build an app for every device, why is it that we don't see more developers releasing apps for every device at the same time? It would seem that this would be a no-brainer. Why is this not the norm, the standard?
It's a good question. Honestly, Xamarin is fairly new. They used to have another one called Mono Framework and Mono Develop. This one's even newer than that, and this makes the ability to kind of go. They make it an ability really easy now to go across platform. Now, sometimes when you're deploying larger apps, like let's say you already have a game or you already have an app that's like built for a business, sometimes those apps are fairly large, and so they need to basically be compiled in Xamarin to work on those. And when they're large like that, Xamarin says, okay, well, we're doing a lot of work for you, so why don't you go ahead and pay us a fee, and then we'll allow you to go ahead and compile. So sometimes those fees are a little larger than some businesses are willing to pay. But honestly, if you have a successful application on one of the platforms already and you're already making some money, it's okay. I would say it'd be okay to spend maybe $400 or $500 to convert that to the other platforms without ever really having to write additional code. And so that to me is valuable. But to build an app from scratch, if it's a small app and you're going across platform, honestly, it really is a no-brainer. It seems too good to be true, but honestly, it was super easy for me to kind of build this out without even using it. And there's a lot of great videos by Xamarin. If you go to Xamarin.com, I sound like I'm doing an ad for them.
Wait. Disclaimer. So Lou does not work for Xamarin. He does not get paid commission by Xamarin. He has no connection to Xamarin other than the fact that he uses their tool.
That's right. I just appreciate it. I mean, that's kind of the key is I appreciate because I'm not an iOS developer. And in order for me to build an iOS app, I would have to go and learn a whole bunch of things I'm not familiar with. And so this is kind of a really easy way for us to do it. And again, it is too good to be true, but it does work, and it works really well.
I think maybe the two of us need to get someone from Xamarin and just have a sit down with them on how they make these tools. Because you just said, listen, I'm not an iOS developer, but if you have these kinds of tools, you are an iOS developer. You just haven't developed for iOS yet.
That's right. I think the key is, and they make it so easy. With iOS, it's a little bit more difficult because you do have to have a Mac in order to do this, or OS X. But Android, they make it even easier because you can install the SDK on Windows and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, you don't have to have the intimate knowledge of all these other platforms. And some people do. I mean, granted, there's really some smart people, especially in the Twit network, Twit group, the Twit fans. There's probably some really smart people that know all the difference. And they're probably like, why spend the money when I can do it myself? And yeah, I agree. I think if you have the knowledge to do it, it's more the power to you. But this makes it easier for people who just don't have the time and or the knowledge to kind of go across platform.
Yeah, actually, Jeff in the chat room comes up with a really good point. And this is not just Xamarin. This argument has been used for pretty much every emulative software solution I've ever seen. He says Xamarin typically has libraries that might slow you down because it has to emulate certain commands. That's always true. But Lou, follow me here. It's become less and less important. I mean, it used to be that you always wanted to write for a particular platform and the language of that platform worked best because the power was limited. Today's devices are so dang powerful that, especially if I'm writing a simple app, you're not going to be able to notice the difference. It's not going to slow down the system appreciatively, and it won't even suck more battery, beyond a couple of percentage points. So, yes, it will slow you down, but I don't think that's a good reason not to use it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key. Is that they don't necessarily always emulate things now. They actually find ways to compile them down to native resources, and so that's kind of the key. Is they're getting a lot better. It's not like they're running the .NET framework fully on your iOS or Android device. They've created an interface layer to the native versions of those platforms, and then they're actually running it on there. So yeah, it's getting a ton better. And even with every version of .NET, especially the latest ones, they can compile down almost to machine code, and you're running just native machine code on your application. So there's almost a point where there's not really any difference between native and managed. So it all depends on what you're doing. If you're doing a lot of graphics and stuff, sometimes there is. But again, XAML is there's points where you can compile into DirectX, and if you've played a game on an Xbox before, all those games are built in DirectX. They're just really hard, a framework on top of all the graphics processors that are out there. So I mean, they do have the capabilities to do all this native capabilities and the speed of whatever that platform runs at.
Right. Oh, well, Lou, I'd say that for homework, maybe we should be asking the folks at home to take, again, we're going to provide you all the code. It's all going to be in the show notes. Just download the zip file, unpack it, and you'll have the entire library that we've been working on for this entire Build an App module. And then use Xamarin and figure out a device that you want to use and go ahead and start developing the view for it. I'd be interested in seeing what people come up with, because you're all going to take the same code, and you're all, I guarantee you, going to come up with different ways of presenting that information through the interface. Does that sound about right? I mean, we've given them enough information, enough knowledge to be able to do that, right, Lou?
Oh yeah, I mean, again, we're going to give them an example that actually has the Windows Store and the Windows Phone application in there, and it, again, it has the login button as the login screen. It has the download of the tasks and to get the tasks to hook up to the code that we gave them before. And then I'll also, as a separate project, I'll send it out, and it'll actually have the Android in there if you have Xamarin installed. And so that'll make it so they can open both. And I think hopefully we'll give them enough tools to kind of build out and do what they need to do themselves.
Lou, I need you to act the wizened guru here, speaking out to the youngins, the ones who want to become code warriors, as they start to design their apps, because this really is a shift. We've gone from a lot of console-style programming, both with C# and with Python and with Perl. Now we're actually looking at designing applications that would run on the mobile devices that we use today. What's the bit of wisdom that you want to give programmers? I mean, there's a lot of things here to get confused about. What advice do you want to give?
So I think, you choose whatever platform you're interested in. I think that's kind of the key first is, if you have an Android device, that was, go and figure out what those tool sets are for the Android device. But if you're just starting out and you want to learn an easy language, Javas and C# are really easy languages to learn. And they all have really great tooling, really great places to go. NetBeans for Java, Eclipse for Java, Visual Studio for C#, and MonoDevelop, Xamarin Studio for C#. And so these are all great places to start. And there's just so much. I mean, there's whole industries built around these things, and videos and things that go around, and really just take those and have an idea going forward. Like, I want to build this, or I want it to do that. There's an app that doesn't, I've had an idea for an app, but I haven't been able to build it. I mean, that's the kind of thing they need to have going into this, right? So that's kind of the key, is once you have that, the tools are there for you, and use Coding 101 as a great kind of fundamental learning building block for it, and then branch out and start finding some other stuff too.
Right. That's Lou Maresca, Senior Software Engineer at Microsoft. Lou, could you please tell the folks at home where they can find you, where they can find your work, and where they could find more coding examples from our Code Warrior?
You bet. So you can find me on Twitter, LouMM. Also, feel free to message me on Twitter. I can always provide, great links to some examples, some videos, some training. A lot of people like to ask me questions about where to find, this, or where to find that, or how do I do this, or how do I do that. Also, the Google Plus community, I'm sure you'll go over that link. I love to just read through the examples. Joe gives some great examples of some other great people on that page, on that community. And I love to just, provide great links there too. And again, of course, my day job, all my work is at crm.dynamics.com.
Fantastic. Lou Maresca, as always, it is an honor and a privilege to have you on the show. And we will see a lot of you in the future, I'm hoping. Yes? Are you still open to that? Have we soured the taste in your mouth yet?
I'm ready to go.
You're ready to go. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, Lou Maresca, we bid him farewell. He has been our Code Warrior.
See you guys.
Now, folks, don't forget that we do this show every week, live Thursdays at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time. If you go to live.twit.tv, you can see the pre-show, the post-show, everything in between. And as long as you're watching live, why not jump into our chat room at irc.twit.tv. In fact, the chat room lives right down there. Every time you write something, I'm reading it during the show, and I try to work in your questions so that we can answer you in real time. Of course, if you can't join us in real time or in real studio, as Brian's trying to show you, why not jump into our G+ community? This is the place to go if you're a beginner, intermediate, or an expert in programming. You can find us at plus.google.com/twitcoding101. Now, the nice thing about this community is because we've got people of all experience levels, if you post a question, it's probably going to get answered. If you've got expertise, it's going to be called upon. In fact, this is a ridiculously active group, and we pull our examples out of here all the time. Actually, for some reason, Joe keeps coming up an awful lot. Also, don't forget that you can find us on Twitter, at least me on Twitter. I'm at twitter.com/PadreSJ. That's at PadreSJ. If you follow me there, you'll be able to see what I do in between shows, what I do on, what do I do on Monday? On Twiet, This Week in Enterprise Tech on Monday, on Padres Corner on Tuesday, and on Know-How and Coding 101 on Thursday. Now, this is the time where I throw to my TD because he's totally not expecting it, and I want to see if he's fast enough. Brian, Cranky Hippo, can you tell the folks where they can find you? If he turns on his mic, which he won't do.
Me. You know, I wasn't ready for that at all, Padre. That was the dramatic pause.
Wow, he's such an actor. Now, Brian, can you tell the folks where they can find you?
They can find me on Thursdays with you doing Know-How and TDing all about Android in this show. And
you broke the illusion.
Dang it, Burke. My illusion. Yeah, sorry. But doing projects with you on Know-How and stuff. So check us out.
Folks, this is the end of this module, but it's not the end of Coding 101. In fact, we're starting to move into our new format. Next week, we've got Smitty. If you've ever gone to DEF CON, you know this man. He is an embedded electronics genius. He's going to show us the other side of programming, the side of programming that's actually tied to hardware and embedded processors. It's all part of our revamp, and we do it because we love you. Until next time, I'm Father Robert Balacer. This has been Coding 101. End of line.